The wind howled through the trees, and the night enveloped the forest like a dark veil. Alex left the house, deciding to refresh his thoughts alone. He was never afraid of the forest, but there was something strange in the air that evening. His friends had warned him of the sinister rumors that circulated about this area, but youthful insolence pushed Alex to go deeper and deeper. He walked along the path, listening to the night sounds. The sounds of distant animals, the clicking of insects and the rustling underfoot created an atmosphere of mystery. Alex often stopped to enjoy the moment, but as the hours dragged on, the forest began to seem more and more gloomy to him. The deeper he went, the more he lost his bearings. The path disappeared, and the forest became more and more confusing. Finally, the boy realized that he was lost. Panic gripped him. He tried to remember where he had come from, looked for familiar landmarks, but the darkness around him only deepened. Gathering his strength, Alex decided that it would be best to go back. He walked, bumping into trees and bushes, but it seemed that the darkness only confused him even more. The wind picked up, and suddenly he noticed a light in the distance. Not believing his luck, the guy headed towards the light, hoping that it was not a mirage. When he got closer, he saw a small hut surrounded by dense forest. The windows were darkened, and the light pulsed softly, emitting a warm glow. Alex knocked on the door, and after a while it opened. A middle-aged woman with a respectable face, but with frightened eyes, stood on the threshold. "Do you need something?" she asked, warily looking around the surroundings. "I'm lost," Alex admitted. "Can I spend the night here?" The woman hesitated, but finally let him in. The hut was modest, but cozy. The fire crackled merrily in the fireplace, and the air was filled with the smell of dried meat and herbs. Alex sat down on the bench, sighing with relief. He began a conversation with the owner, whose name was Nadezhda. She told him that she had lived in this forest for a long time, and that many lost people came to her for help. But right in the middle of the story, another man burst through the door with a loud knock, tall and thin, with a pale face and an ominous expression in his eyes. A narrow smile touched his lips as he looked around. "Ah, guests," he said, his voice strangely melodic. "It seems I came just in time." Nadezhda glanced at him quickly, fear flashing across her face. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. Who was this person? Why was she reacting to him like this? "Calm down," she said, her lips trembling. "It's just a guess." But the stranger's eyes were already burning with hatred. He came closer to Alex and examined him more carefully. "What are your intentions, boy?" he asked, leaning closer. "Why did you come to this dark forest?" Alex felt his heart pound. He had no intentions other than finding a safe place. He tried to explain, but the words stuck in his throat. The stranger only smirked mockingly. "Well, since you're here, you should know that this forest does not forgive mistakes, and its inhabitants can be very cruel." Alex watched as Nadezhda turned pale, and his fear grew. Suddenly, loud rustling sounds came from behind the door, as if someone wanted to break in. The young man's feet seemed to have grown to the floor as he noticed the stranger become even more menacing. "You're still home," he said, and there was a dangerous note in his voice. "You don't want to upset your new friends." Hopes weighed, and Alex realized that he was more afraid of this man than he had ever been in his life. And then the creature that was now watching them so clearly lowered its head, like a predator stalking its prey. "It's usually terrible when people bring their secrets into the forest. I think you have your own dark secrets that you don't want anyone to know." Alex was ready to run, but his body was reluctant. At that moment, he noticed Hope crouch down, clutching her hands tightly to her chest. Something was wrong. The smell of death hung in this cabin. As if catching his thoughts, the stranger came closer and leaned towards him. "Tell me what's on your mind, boy. I'm an expert at solving things." For a moment, Alex met Nadezhda's gaze, and in her eyes he saw the same anxiety he felt. He knew that his only chance to save himself was to somehow attract the stranger's attention. "I came here because I want to see the world," Alex shouted, although he knew that these words would hardly help his cause. "I was just looking for adventure." For a moment, surprise flashed across the stranger's face, as if he was charmed by this naivety. "Adventure, you say?" he said, stepping back to assess the young man. "How can you not know where you are? This forest is not just an adventure, it's a trap, and I am its keeper." Alex felt his breath catch in fear. He didn't know what to do, where to run. The walls of the hut began to press around him, and he knew that his time was running out. "It's time to go," the stranger said and stepped back towards the door. "You can still save your soul if you follow me." But at that moment, Nadezhda, as if awakening from hypnosis, jumped to her feet. "Leave him alone," she screamed. "You have no right." The stranger's face was distorted with hatred, and tension hung in the air. Alex knew that everything could end at any moment. His life was hanging by a thread between this terrible man and the woman who had suddenly become his unexpected protector. The stranger turned to her in rage. "Have you finally decided to stand up for this young man? You forget that you made your own choice, Nadezhda, and I will not be embarrassed if you have to pay for it." The situation was heating up to the limit. Alex jumped up abruptly, his instincts screaming for flight. But he didn't know where to go. He felt his hands shaking, unable to resist even when the cup of patience was overflowing. "Let's go," the stranger said, surrounding Nadezhda and preparing to attack. He was terrifying, as if darkness itself had taken on a human form, and even in fear, Alex came to one single courageous decision. Sweeping away high tables and chairs, he rushed to the door. Nadezhda, screaming, tried to stop him, but he could not leave her. So the only obstacle he had was her own life and the opportunity to escape into the night. As soon as he ran out into the street, the forest surrounded him like an evil creature ready to devour him. Screams and a rich mixed sound sounded in his ears. The hoarse voice of the stranger followed him, further and further. The twilight bent its arms under the weight of the night, and the forest seemed to laugh at his misfortune. The trees smoldered, the fireflies sparkled. But this was no consolation. Alex rushed forward, not knowing where he would end up, if only to get away from danger. Late at night, when the moon was almost completely hidden behind the clouds, Alex decided to take a walk in the forest near his house. He had heard many stories about how the forest was full of mysteries and dangers, but the teenager was not afraid of the rumors. He believed that these were just urban legends. Armed only with a flashlight and a mobile phone, Alex entered the forest. At first, he enjoyed the silence, heard the cracking of branches and the occasional howling ear of an owl. However, he soon noticed that the light of the flashlight did not always illuminate the path, and the forest became more and more confusing. The trees seemed to shrink around him, as if whispering their secrets. He took a few steps deeper and, forgetting about the time, suddenly realized that he was lost. Trying to find his way back, he began to panic. The clock on his phone showed that more than 2 hours had passed. Every sound terrified him. Vlad, his friend, had told him more than once that sometimes strange figures appeared in the forest. Soon he saw a light in the distance, a faint glow that grew brighter with every step. Alex decided to go there, hoping that it would help him find a way out. As he approached, the glowing point grew larger and turned into a window of a small hut. It looked abandoned, but the light still attracted him. Gathering all his courage, Alex pushed the door. It creaked and opened. There was no one inside, but cracks in the walls let in a little light, creating an eerie atmosphere. On the table stood an old, dusty lamp, and several chairs, as if waiting for their owner. While exploring the hut, Alex came across strange objects, rusty tools, blood-stained rags, and photographs depicting people with terrible expressions on their faces. Suddenly, a hoarse voice was heard from somewhere behind him. "You shouldn't be here." The boy turned around and saw a man in dirty clothes, with a scarred face. It was the killer that all the horror stories were told about. His face was distorted by an evil grin. "You are not the first to come here, but, alas, you are the last," the man said, grinning. Alex, overcome with fear, took a step back and soon tripped over an old board. The killer came closer, and the glare of the lamp reflected on his knives, as if they were waiting for their time. The boy remembered his capabilities and, gritting his teeth, rushed to the door. He broke the silence of the night when he ran at the door, but it did not open. The killer was soon behind him, and he was forced to make a cruel decision. Alex grabbed one of the rusty tools from the table and, turning, rushed to attack. Fear raged inside him, but he knew that he had to fight for his life. The fight between them was short and brutal. The killer was stronger, but Alex, driven by the instinct of self-preservation, did everything possible to break free. Despite the terrible wounds from the knife, he still found a way to break free from the killer's grasp and run into the forest. Now he understood that the forest was not just a strange place, but also a trap. With each passing minute, his strength was fading, but fear led him to a clear thought: he must find a way home. He ran without looking back, clutching the homemade tool in his hands, hoping that he would not meet the killer again. A long time passed until he saw a familiar silhouette. It was his home. Exhausted and scared, he ran inside and closed the door. Night slowly gave way to morning, and although he was safe, the memory of that terrible night remained with him for the rest of his life. Alex didn't tell anyone what had happened to him, but he knew that there was always something lurking in the dark in the forest, and that maybe someone else would be as careless as he was. The forest would drink in his fear, and he would always be a reminder of that terrible night when he came close to death. Chatwood Plus Midjourney, October 17, 2024 to 11 p.m. Night had fallen over the forest like a dark shroud, and only the moonlight was breaking through the dense foliage, casting long shadows that danced among the trees. Alex, a young man with a thirst for adventure, decided to spend the evening in nature, challenging his fears and boring routine. What bad could happen in the forest? He thought as he went deeper into the unfamiliar thicket. At first, everything went well. Nature filled him with energy, and he enjoyed the silence, broken only by the chirping of birds. But soon the path he was walking on became more and more invisible, and the trees around him began to seem imposing and gloomy. Alex realized that he was lost. His heart beat faster as he tried to remember how he got here. Don't panic, he told himself. Just find your way back. But time passed, and the night grew deeper. The feeling of unease grew as he realized that not only could he not find his way home, but the forest itself began to seem somehow alien and hostile. Every sound seemed to rise to an eerie symphony, and the very air became too oppressive. After some time, when he was already losing hope, Alex saw a dim light in the distance. It was a small hut, modest but inviting in its isolation, as if it was the only place where he could feel safe. He hurried towards it, relief spreading through his body as he approached the door. "Hey," he called, knocking on the wood. "Anyone there?" At first, nothing happened. Alex knocked again, and suddenly the door opened, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside stood an elderly man with a wrinkled face and sick, dark eyes. "Come in, boy," he said. "I've been waiting for you." As if his words had cast a spell on Alex, the boy stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The aroma of something fried and smoked filled the air, and his stomach responded with a rumble. But he still felt uneasy. He felt that something was wrong here. "You're clearly lost," the man said, thinking him over from head to toe. "I have food if you're hungry. But remember, the night forest does not forgive recklessness." "Thank you," Alex replied, feeling the hair on the back of his neck stand up in fear. "I just wanted to find my way back." "There are many people who never return," the older man said gloomily, rubbing his hands. "The forest spares no one." Outside, darkness creeps around corners, and those who are deaf to their fears may not hear them fall prey. Alex knew that these were just words to intimidate, but his head was beginning to spin with fear. He sat down at the table and ate quickly, hoping that now he would be able to find a way out. "You don't know what kind of dark creatures live in this forest?" the man asked. "No," Alex admitted. "What do you mean?" "Some say that these are only legends," the old man answered. "But I have seen them. They wait in the shadows, and if they notice you, you will never leave." At that moment, the hut began to tremble, and Alex felt his body tremble. He glanced out the window. The wind was howling like an old wild dog. Suddenly, there was a crack outside the window, and something large and dark rushed past. "They're here," the old man said, his eyes shining with wild joy. Alex jumped up, his head starting to spin, and walked resolutely to the door. "Listen, I have to go," he shouted. But the old man stood up, his face distorted with anger. "You don't know where you're going. The forest won't let you go," he shouted, his eyes burning. Suddenly, loud footsteps were heard behind the hut. Alex jumped out into the street and looked back at the hut when it was behind him, and then rushed forward into the darkness, unaware that he was already being followed. A thrill ran through his body when he found himself back in the forest. He ran, his feet treading heavily on the earthen flooring, but somewhere voices sounded, as if someone was calling his name. He kept running, trying his best not to look back. Chatwood Plus Midjourney, October 17, 2024 to 11 p.m. The night was becoming more and more ominous, and the space around him seemed alive and animated. He never stopped. His legs needed support, but Alex knew that if he stopped, he would not be able to find the strength to continue. His breathing was becoming shallower and shallower, but he could not allow himself to relax the tension. As he made his way through the encroaching trees, he saw the dim light again, but this time it was not the light of a cabin. It was an old abandoned cabin, and Alex felt fear seize him. Something was bothering him. It looked as if someone lived in it. A shadow flickered in the window. Gathering his last strength, he went to the door and, with trembling hands, pushed it. The door creaked, as if moaning in pain. It was dark inside, and he could see almost nothing but the outlines of old furniture and dust. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from around the corner, and Alex froze in place. "Who's there?" A hoarse voice was heard. I'm just lost," he answered, trying not to let his voice betray his fear. The shadow stepped into the light, and Alex saw a man, tall, with thin features and wild eyes. He was holding something shiny in his hands, a knife blade, gleaming in the dim light. "You say you're lost?" the man said with a smirk. "And you don't even know who you're dealing with?" Alex felt his heart skip a beat. He didn't realize that this wasn't just a man, it was evil, breeding in this forest. "Please, stay back," he shouted, stumbling toward the back wall. "Don't worry, you'll be part of the forest soon," the killer said, approaching with a grim expression. "Many have tried to get out before you, but the darkness takes those who take too long to leave." His eyes sparkled with maniacal joy, and Alex understood that he was no longer just lost. He had become part of a game where one was the hunter and the other was the victim. At that moment, Alex noticed that he had closed the window, but it was slightly open. With effort, despite the stupor, he chose the moment and, before the other had time to react, ran out of the secret exit.